Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. So first up, thanks for all the kind wishes from last week. It wasn't meant to incite any sort of responses like that. I just feel like when the people who watch my channel, whether it be YouTube or Twitch, I don't have a career without those people. So I at least owe it to them to let them know why something may be going on with me, without getting too personal about anything individually. So thank you for all the kind words, and again, I'll keep that clarity with you guys as I have in the past. However, before we get into the Q&A, I actually need some feedback from you guys, especially from the patrons in particular, because as you guys know, we normally do a readout of our patrons here at the beginning, and last week we didn't do that. Last week at the end of the video was a credit scene, finally. No more OBS crashing, no more Vegas crashing, which were the two major issues I kept having with trying to use that credit roll. So I'm actually going to put a credit roll through the beginning of this. It's already been rolling at this point, and I need some feedback about how to approach that, because now that it's finally working, I need to find the best way to integrate it into content such as State of the Realm and Mondays with Mr. Happy. So please, patrons especially, let me know what you think about the sponsor role. I'm still going to read out the Patrons of Darkness and new patrons as well, though this week I don't remember if I have all the new patrons, because there's like one or two new from the ones that we did last week. I don't think I mentioned Ethan from last week or Darius from last week, so those two are new, and thank you to those two for supporting. But of course, we also have our Patrons of Darkness, Khuja from Jenova, and Kurenai, who have been massive supporters. Regardless of the sponsor role, they're always going to get the shoutouts, and new patrons, you guys are going to get the shoutouts as well. Maybe at the top of the month, I check the list and I read out all the patrons that are currently going for that month, and then include all of them in the sponsor role, still update it weekly. But with this, it should be a much simpler start and end to most of the videos. In fact, I could probably start putting the patron role at the end of every video that I have, to be honest, and just extend it past just Mondays and Mr. Happy and State of the Realm. Anyway, I want to get to some questions because we didn't get to as many as I wanted to last week, so let's get started. All right, I recognize this name, and I haven't taken a question from them in quite some weeks. This one seems like it's going to be a short one. Hi, Haps. Playing Ninja right now, and I got kind of a question for hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Should Armor Crush combo off of Shadowfang? A lot of ninjas were really surprised that they separated Shadowfang and made it a two-part combo again. And I feel like even though it felt kind of awkward in Heavensward with the way the job was built there, specifically when I played it at the Media Tour, it made a lot more sense to me. I haven't gotten to play Ninja at level 80 though, so the idea of kind of going from either Armor Crush into Shadowfang or Shadowfang into Armor Crush, it's kind of in line with Disembowel and Chaos Thrust if you were to do it in the reverse way. So I guess on paper, without actually looking at Ninja or knowing it in depth, it actually doesn't seem like that bad of an idea. And I actually think by 5.2, Ninja's going to have some streamlining done so that the effort put into the job more accurately represents the amount of DPS it's expected to bring, since it's going to be on the lower end because of Trick Attack, as long as that's always there. I hope that by 5.2, they'll have that, kind of like the Warrior changes with Inner Release. But until then, this is ninjas. How about this? People who are ninjas endgame who have a lot of experience on it, please comment on what you think about making your Shadowfang combo include Armor Crush either as the second or third combo. How would that affect your rotation? Discuss it in the comment section below. All right, next question. What is it? Yo, hey Haps, rewatch your healer versus video, which by the way, I of course am planning a versus series, but gonna wait till after Savage is out, after we have the 0.05 balance changes, and then we can start cranking out versus videos. And I agree that the healers were pretty balanced. Yeah, they were in a pretty good spot collectively. White Mage a little bit behind, needed a little bit of help, but I kind of liked where the healers were. Do you think a fourth healer could have helped with the lack of healers, or if the healer classes were more balanced? I think they were right in that a fourth healer probably would have been problematic. The big thing is they specifically noted as Astro being the problem child of the bunch, and most people kind of agreed with that. That's where they kind of pigeonholed themselves into their healer design in a sense. The thing is, I don't think they've really undone that pigeonhole. I just think it's far less pronounced now than it used to be. They made some changes to some of the more powerful shielding skills to make it so they aren't so make or break. And White Mage kind of standing as the, the ultra powerful healer, it stands out a lot more now, since a lot of their new skills were focused around mana, managing their mana, and having a decent amount of personal DPS over the other healers because they don't bring any raid DPS contribution. That being said, I think the biggest problem right now is that there's a little bit too much power in one direction and not enough power in the other two directions. White Mage, I imagine, will probably get its MP specifically is probably going to be hit. Maybe 20 potency off Glare, maybe 10 or 20 potency off the initial hit on Dia. I don't expect much more than that to change for white mages, though. I do also expect, and this would also hit their DPS as well, I expect a size will probably get brought up to 60 seconds. And I had someone suggest that Thin Air probably be made to a 3-4 minute cooldown as opposed to a 2-minute cooldown. Because right now their biggest tool is the fact that they are a bottomless pit of MP. And that also ties into how much DPS the job can do. Considering how many off globals and how much the lilies actually help with mana usage, because it's, GCDs every 30 seconds that can be used in exchange as opposed to using MP. So they are really, really powerful and can be used on the go and give white mage a lot of freedom and a lot of movement. So there's a lot to consider there when it comes to white mage. As for Astro, potency boost across the board. I'd like to see Divination's cooldown brought down a little bit. And Scholar, I really want them to just get energy drain. And I think that if they don't get energy drain, at the very least, Ether Flow, when you use it, it should consume any remaining Ether Flow stacks you had when you reuse Ether Flow and give you more mana back. Have you even seen some people suggest Astro getting like 200 or 300 MP back every time they play a card? Curious what other Astros think of that, because I haven't played it enough to really have an opinion on that, but it was an interesting suggestion that I think makes sense to just give this tiny bit of MP back on card usages. So again, Astros, let me know what you think of that idea. All right, next one, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hello. Why do we still have MP? You're not the first person to actually ask me that. You'd think you might be the first one, but nope. Healing is effectively capped by potency, spell speed, and cooldown recast, while raises can easily be limited to once every 30 seconds. Caster DPS, it's so trivial I won't even. While on this, why do healers get the least DPS, or at least potency per second, below the new tanks without any TP management and their auto attack still being a thing? Tell that to white mage. Tanks are not happy about that. Job effectiveness will vary depending on player skill and vice versa, as in more skill and resource management required, the less effective the job. Not that we aren't getting used to getting shafted every expansion. So now that I've read the whole comment, let's do this. Why do we still have MP, caster DPS, it's trivial, and healing is effectively capped by these other things? So you actually are not entirely wrong. It's kind of awkward that all the physical attacking jobs don't have to worry about a resource that's, I guess, as limiting. Like, each of them usually has their own job gauges to track, and it's a little bit more intense, I suppose, but the 3 caster DPS have to do something similar at the very least. And so it's kind of weird that, the red mage or the summoner, obviously the black mage doesn't really give a shit about MP. It's really just there to limit the amount of cast that they have. And honestly, a good enough reason to have MP in the first place is for black mage alone. But for red mage and summoner, I mean, they still have this limiting factor of how much MP they can actually spend. And it's been a big topic because as the 2 casters with a combat res, their MP gets very strained nowadays when they actually have to res, which is a good thing. It's a good thing they don't just have free reign to that, but of course you could put other restrictions on those jobs as well. So, outside of black mage, it's almost within reason to say if they just got rid of MP altogether, that they could add different restrictions onto these jobs and it would rebalance things. But saying that in a bubble without actually looking at how it applies to the rest of the context of the game, it sounds like it makes a lot more sense on paper than it may necessarily make when you actually are implementing it in the game. I know in 24-mans in particular, it would massively raise the amount of difficulty that 24-mans possess if you were limited to the amount of reses. It would make them, basically not having them would be nigh impossible for some 24-man groups to ever make those miracle recoveries. So that actually goes for a lot of pug content. And I mean, yes, obviously you should be encouraging people to not die, but the freedom to use it as much as you can, as long as the resource is there, is something that is valuable for a lot of people, whether it be for progressing early days in Savage or just making it through the Duty Finder at times. So that's a big reason why I wouldn't want them to put such a restriction on it. But at the same time, I'd like to see them design more content like the Baldesion Arsenal, where it's limited to some capacity, whether it's, completely being removed outside of special actions or it's just not allowed altogether at all. I'd like to see separate content that restricts the usage of resurrections, but not necessarily apply such a huge restriction to the rest of the game as you suggested here. But yeah, it is weird that just the combat that the casters just don't, they still have to worry about a resource while they're AoEing, but all the physical jobs don't. As for why do healers get the least DPS and least potency per second? So first of all, White Mage that's a big topic. It's the reason why potency, I mentioned potency nerfs earlier, is because they're out DPSing tanks if they're playing everything right, they're out DPSing tanks. And that's literally for spamming Glare for 30 seconds and pressing Dia once every 30 seconds. Pressing a Size once every 45 seconds, which also gives you MP back. And anytime you have to move, making sure you use a Lily, because on the move, it's effectively 300 potency value versus using Dia's initial hit for the 120 plus whatever dot ticks you get. It's crazy. It's really, really crazy the amount of damage they put out. And I'm not going to say it's no effort, but it's certainly less effort than the tanks have to put forth because their jobs are actually built in with rotations. Yeah, some of them are a matter of hitting Inner Chaos 8 times in the first, 10 G or the first like 15 GCDs. And yes, some of them are about these 30 or 60 second rotations where you're going between a physical and a magical, or you're going between this effective combo they can only use with ammo, or these burst windows with no mercy. But they are still way more involved, and making it so that they deal less DPS than the healers is very odd for tanks who have to put forth as much effort as they do. And don't get me wrong, maybe in Savage, healers really don't have all that much freedom to actually do that, and this becomes a problem that really only exists in normal mode content, in extreme trial content. Maybe it's not an issue in Ultimate and Savage, but I always say it, unless you put damage like every 6 to 7 seconds, healers are always going to get GCDs out to DPS, and it doesn't matter what other things you try to do to them. Even if it's just 1 or 2 buttons, they will do it over and over and over again. So really surprised to see just how much DPS, even honestly the other 2 healers, while they're putting out way less than White Mage, the fact that they can press just 1 or 2 buttons and output that amount of DPS is really nice. It's not as nice as it could be, but it's pretty nice to say the least. So yeah, that's definitely the reason. It's the amount of how involved the actual DPS rotation for these jobs are. Whereas White Mage, for the healers, it's more about how can they weave that between their the healing that they need to do, which as of the content we have right now is not a whole lot. So hopefully that answers the question, or at least gives you my insight to the question. But if not, just let me know. All right, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Old Haps, hope you are doing well. Dancer-related question, if I may. Sure, since I said last week I didn't want to take many job-related ones, this week I'm trying to take a few more. Which would you say is the better choice in a 4-man dungeon with 2 dancers? The 2 dancers dance with each other, or they dance with the tank and the healer, so everyone gets a damage buff. So the big thing about having 2 dancers is 2 dancers can effectively dance for each other and give each other standard step. Which means that effectively when you have 2 dancers in the group, they are both permanently buffed by 10% as long as both of them are keeping up with their standard steps. Now, theoretically, in a dungeon, dancers should be, if you have 2 DPS, those 2 DPS should be the 2 highest contributing members of the group in terms of DPS and kill speed. I mean, it's in the name of the role. So Dancer always wants to go with the person who will be providing the most DPS. So I'll say that if both of the dancers are doing the most DPS in the group, they're both, somewhat decent, then it makes the most sense for them to just dance with each other because that's going to yield the highest percentage increase. However, of course, that's not always the case in the Duty Finder. I've had plenty of times where a healer or a tank out DPSs a DPS. And in situations like that, if you can track it, if you see that there's very odd patterns coming from the fellow DPS, or if you're running ACT in the background and you can just already see the numbers that they're getting, it's within reason to put it on someone else. And if that person asks why, maybe don't tell them. Maybe don't tell them, listen, tank's kind of better than you. I don't know how to put that any other way. Let's just finish the dungeon, move on, okay? Yeah, that's it. It's whoever's doing the highest DPS, and if that's a fellow dancer, then so be it. All right, this one I saw was bait because I saw monk changes. I was like, okay, I haven't played monk, so let me see if I'm even capable of answering this. And I'm even less capable of answering it, but I'm including it because it yells monk changes. Monk changes. Okay, now that I have your attention, how you doing? Do you know if we'll be seeing level 80 PvP armor and weapons? I'd imagine in 5.1 they said there's a new PvP mode, or at least new PvP changes coming in 5.1. So that's when I would expect it, if at all. Also, I don't know if you do PvP, but if you could change it or add to it, what would you do? I had a really high interest in PvP back in Heavensward, actually. And I'd say that's when PvP was at its most frustrating as a casual player, because the Heavensward rotations were very strict, they were very involved, and our hotbars were just super, super full. And on top of that, then there were a bunch of PvP actions you had to throw on your bar. It was a bit chaotic, but I still really, really enjoyed it because some of my favorite modes were, popular throughout that time. Specifically, Seal Rock has always been my favorite mode. a lot of the other modes I feel either don't have a good fun balance or are not focused enough on individual players, or it's just too gimmicky. Like Rival Wings is fun for me, but it's not fun enough for me to choose to use my time playing it. I just don't like how gimmicky it is, you know, it essentially being this MOBA-esque thing with, you know, the objective that pops in the middle that everyone just needs to rush to every time that it appears. Or, I don't know, I just kind of miss some of the classics, like Capture the Flag. Like, I look at WoW's PvP modes, and to this day, even the more gimmicky ones, I just had more fun in. Strand of the Ancients I loved, Arathi Basin I love, Warsong Gulch, like, most of them were fairly straightforward and simple. You know, you didn't have to have all these rules and these different locations on the map with all these micro objectives, and you know, then these gimmicky giant robots or these random spawns with like ice or nodes for you to capture. It was the same every time, and it just came down to player skill. And I like that, and I wish we had more of that. That would be something that would get me to play a lot more PvP in Final Fantasy XIV. More traditional PvP modes. And I get that the reason they don't do that is because they want a casual player to be able to hop in and not feel bad if they can't perform well. But you can't win with that. It's PvP. You just can't bring forth that mentality and let it dictate what you can't do in PvP, especially when I'm just asking for the most basic thing. Just give me Capture the Flag. At least give me that. If you give me that, I'll PvP more. But I will say that I really do like the Feast. You know, even though I haven't done the Feast in a while, I really like the Feast structure that's not a straight up deathmatch. It is, but there's very few micro objectives there. They're still playing around line of sight, which I think is a very important thing for PvP, especially more competitive modes like the Feast. And I like that the objectives are very straightforward, but not absolute win conditions. I like that there's pressure for burst performances during the culling time. I really like everything they've structured about the Feast, and then it comes down to individual job balance, which I'm not qualified to talk about on this show. So it's really just for the more casual PvP modes, because I find that if you're interested in one PvP mode, you're more likely to try another one. And because I lost interest in all the other PvP modes, I basically have to choose Feast or Die or pray for Seal Rock, you know, whenever Seal Rock is the one that's like in for the day. And I'm just not willing to play that game. I'm just not willing to do that. I just want to be able to go and have fun when I PvP. I don't want to have to think so much about what mode it is, what day it is. I just want to be able to go in and have fun. All right, next one. Hello, first time asker, long time viewer. Thank you. As a first timer, please accept dancer buffs and 5 more Yalm Song technical stuff. Thank you. I wanted to talk about this for a long time, but what do you think about a radio option in 14? Due to the amount of amazing music we have, wouldn't it be awesome if we could listen to whatever we want while doing dungeons or just in the field? I would rock Force Your Way, everything, since it's so good. Yeah, I kind of just do this naturally. I just go like, because I own a bunch of the albums, and if I don't, I just pull up a YouTube video and I go, okay, I'd rather listen to this song during this fight. I was listening to the Titan music during Titania EX, and I'm like, well, it's Titan EX, so you know, the Titan music, it works pretty well, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, people have been requesting this for a long time, and I don't remember what the answer was. I think technically speaking, they said it was possible, but very difficult to do for one reason or the other. And the Orchestrion works because it's specifically designed for the zones an Orchestrion is available in. They've answered this, and that's why I don't want to answer it saying I don't know what. I just don't remember what it is that they said, why it's taken this so long to get a radio option. And I don't know if it was a reason why we can't ever have it or why it's just not there yet. I agree with you. I want the option. It would make me personally as a player more invested to go out collecting Orchestrion rolls, and it's a whole different discussion about that. I don't want to get into about you know, content in the game versus I guess what's considered content in Final Fantasy XIV. We kind of touched upon it last week when we were talking about story being a barrier for new players, but that might just be a separate video altogether, because it's something I'm actually quite interested in doing a discussion about. I've been doing a ton of discussion videos, so expect a lot more of them, because I've definitely got a few coming up. I knew as soon as I said next week I'd answer more job questions. Dude, almost all the questions are job questions. I don't mind though. Hey, Mr. Happy, feel better and have yourself a wonderful day. Take care of yourself and well wishes. Sorry, I know I meant wishes. Thank you. Anyway, now on to my very simple question. What are your thoughts on Machinist and its rework in the context of the ranged DPS role? Do you think it might be possible that meta may see parties of 3 support buff amp DPS and 1 main DPS to do the brunt of the damage dealing? So I think that I think the big thing is to remember whenever we ask questions like this is, as long as you have one of each role, you have 2 tanks, 2 healers, and then the remaining 3 DPS roles evenly represented with, you know, that 1 extra DPS filling in a double for that role, it really shouldn't matter what you bring to raids if the players are good enough to win. So a lot of people like to ask about meta, what's the best job to play? It's like whatever job you're good at, because I don't care if you're the 9.5 10k ninja, which is, you know, around what their 95 to 99 percentile is looking like in a lot of fights. And if you can play Dragoon, but it's only 8k DPS, I don't care that Dragoon is, you know, technically people like it better at the moment. I'd rather have you on the ninja if that's what you actually wanted to play because you're playing it better. So that being said, let me answer the first question. Machinist and its rework, I've loved it. I think there's a few pros and cons to it that I'll probably bring up in a versus video unless the design of it changes. It's a job I feel is very, and I feel this way about the entire ranged physical role. I feel the entire role is just, it's way more intuitive than it used to be. As I leveled Dancer, as I leveled Machinist, as I leveled Bard, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is the 100% optimal way to be using this, but intuitively, all of these things line up and make sense to me. And that's great because not every job necessarily does that. I haven't felt that way about some jobs in the past. There are things that I actually need to like sit down, practice, and ingrain into my head, like no matter how, you know, unexciting it may be. The ninja was a big one for me in Stormblood. I just really didn't enjoy it. And then even when I understood it, I just really had no interest in playing it. But for Machinist in particular, it's got so few buttons and it's so straightforward. And there's still so many little things you can do to optimize it. I took it into like Titania EX today and I got like a 98 percentile and I wasn't even really trying to optimize it. Now, of course, that's not a great representation, and someone said they uploaded the log because they said that so basically what FF Logs does is for anyone who doesn't know, who's watching this, who's a newer player, we use a third-party program to track DPS. Whenever I use it, I don't usually have an overlay for it running, but ultimately what it does is it parses our data logs and then presents a number based on what our data logs actually say. So when you upload it to ACT, however, or when you upload the file from ACT to FF Logs, what it'll do is it'll cut out overkill, where it's like basically you did more damage than the amount of health was available on something, or more damage than actually needed to be done. And it usually just sheds off a little bit. It's called the FF Logs tax. And then on top of that, there's personal DPS versus raid DPS contribution, which is brand new to FF Logs for any of the new logs, like brand new logs that have just been incorporated. And somebody said they uploaded our Titanias because I was like 11.48 before the tax, and then they were like, oh, you're 11.2 after the tax. I'm like, great. And I went to check it and I'm like, there's no logs here. But how did you know? they must have like the uploader, but it just showed them what the uploaded number would have looked like, but they didn't upload it. So I'm like, damn, dude, that would have been, if that was the truth, that would have been a 98th percentile one, which is like, that means you're in the top 2% of DPS output. But I don't feel like I was a master on the job. I wouldn't say someone, hey, just do exactly what I'm doing, which is weird because you'd think that if I'm getting that kind of number, I should feel that way. I should be confident that what I'm doing is that degree of accurate. So the fact that it's that intuitive, that without really reading anything, or just maybe after some light discussion to go, hey guys, I've just been doing this in the opener. I've been in like top 10% percentiles. And I was like, oh, if I do that opener, that's the highest potency per second in an opener. It lines up better with buffs, etc., etc. And that's it. That's all it took. And I just find that the entire role is so intuitive, and I love the ranged physical role in this expansion. I find it so much fun. Dancer, the most fun. Machinist just barely behind it, and Bard a little bit separated from the two, but still so much fun. Now, as for the second question, do you think meta may see 3 support buff amp DPS and 1 main DPS? Ultimately, it's going to come down to when people do end up talking about meta, as irrelevant as it really is in this game, outside of very, very few scenarios, mostly just speed killing, and then minor parts in terms of progression, which I think realistically, Red Mage is the only thing I feel confident saying that it's meta when it comes to progression in particular, just for the massive quick reses that you can get, just to see the next mechanic, not even save the run. Regardless of that, whatever does the highest amount of raid DPS is going to be meta. So what you're describing to me, if that yielded the highest possible raid DPS, I'd say yes. But I can't tell you if it does. If not, that's what we'd call a pad run, where even though FF Logs will probably look at that and be like, nah, bro, that's not, come on, man, that's so much cheese right now. We can't make that the 99th percentile. Players still like to do that kind of stuff because it's a lot of fun to get those like insane, shouldn't really be anywhere near these numbers, but thanks for the tether, thanks for Litany, thanks for dance partner, thanks for this, thanks for that. It's a lot of fun to do that. So maybe people will definitely do this. People always do the thing you're suggesting, but whether or not it's mathematically meta, I couldn't tell you at the moment. All right, on to the next one. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy, hope you're doing well. Long-time listener, first-time asker. Thank you. Real quick, now that we've seen the first Eden tier, what did you think about it? Do you think they'll do the extra fight on Savage like Neo X-Death? What could possibly follow that Titan? So, first of all, we know they're not going to do a... Well, okay, so they said they don't want to do door bosses. I'm still not feeling like there won't be a door boss. Like what X-Death was to Neo X-Death and Kefka to God Kefka and Omega MNF to God Omega. But okay, let's just assume that what they've said, that there's not going to be door bosses, holds true. I actually think they're going to do bonus phases for almost all the fights, like just Savage exclusive phases. Whether or not they're as insanely cool as, let's say, Brute Justice with Winged Justice or a Neo X-Death, that's hard to say. I feel like specifically the third and fourth fight have a lot of room to have some really, really cool things happen that are Savage exclusive, especially the fourth fight, Titan. That arena is way too big, and even those like long pillars that are kind of out, they're not out too far. Those look way too well rendered to not play some sort of role in the final fight. And I love it because with this, whatever they are going to do is much less predictable. When we got X-Death, everyone's like, there's going to be Neo X-Death. I have no doubt about this. We saw Kefka, we already knew. We saw Omega MNF, we're like, okay, I don't know what the hell the last phase is going to look like, but they're going to do it again. This, there's room to be surprised. And then maybe after this, there's less room to be surprised. Maybe they need to just, maybe one tier have a door boss, maybe one tier not have a door boss, maybe one tier, they just do one like crazy long fight that just is completely different from its normal mode encounter, but is like way more fleshed out. I think there's going to be bonus phases for a lot of the bosses throughout Eden Savage, all the way going through to 12, and I really can't wait to see. I'm so excited for this, so much more excited than I was for Omega. All right, we're coming up to close to 30 minutes, but because I didn't answer as many questions as I wanted to last week, we'll probably make this Mondays with Mr. Happy a little longer than the last few have been. Not an hour long like we've done in the past, but more reasonable. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey Haps, what elements do you think are necessary to restore the empty? Apart from water and earth, which are both logical and already covered, do we really need fire in that much? What about wind? Additionally, is there a chance we'll be seeing one primal from every element on the wheel, or just the 4 classic elements? Furthermore, do you think we'll see any Barthandelus or Orphan-style bosses in the Eden raid? I thought they might, since they are very well connected to Eden in 13, even though it's not the same as the Eden in 8. So first of all, I think all 6 of the original primals, Ifrit, Garuda, Titan, Leviathan, Ramu, and Shiva, are going to be present in the Eden raid. I feel very confident about this, and in case you're wondering how, at the very least, from Urian J's explanation throughout the main scenario of the astral and umbral elements, we know there are 6, and we've known there are 6 for a long, long time. On top of that, you then have light and dark, respectively, which Ethis has joined us for a lot of State of the Realms recently to have lore discussions about astral and umbrally aspected ether. Now, that being said, I think, here's my prediction for 5.2. I think the other 4 elements we're going to take care of in that stretch. Now, if we don't, I'm suspecting 3 of them, and then 1 of them saved for the last tier. But because of what's been happening with the potential Void Scent and the 13th, or some sort of time shenanigans, or an Ultimecia style character potentially making an appearance in the future of the Eden Raid series, I feel as though the final raid tier is going to be entirely dedicated to this Void Scent threat that we don't really understand just yet. So I actually really hope that the final fight in the second tier of Eden is Shiva, because Isael and Shiva, that's totally potential to do a motorcycle, because there's Isael and Shiva, you could technically remember them both, and thus there could be 2 bosses there. But more importantly, Hrace-Velgr. I feel like some sort of Hrace-Velgr appearance, obviously not exactly Hrace-Velgr, but our interpretation and our summoning of this being of ice, playing a really important role. I think that there's a lot of room for that. I'm really looking forward to seeing the rest. My predicted order for 5 through 8, if all 4 of them are in a row, I already said 8 for Shiva, so I'll move backwards. 7, I think, will be, and I don't think they're going to go in chronological order because they're already not. I think 7 is going to be Ramu. I think 6 is going to be Ifrit, and I think 5 is going to be Garuda. I think that's what they're going to do, and then I think 9 through 12 I couldn't predict. I think we'll see some Final Fantasy VIII inspired stuff. Griever is a very realistic possibility that I will not rule out. And I actually am subscribing to the theory that people were really bugged out that we got Eden Prime first. They're like, whoa, that's not how it's supposed to be. And I think that's deliberate. They specifically wanted to show us that this wasn't just us going inside of Eden and, you know, discovering the truth. That, you know, Eden was going to be a very real part of the entire story. But I don't think that means we're done with Eden. I still think we're going to fight Eden again in the final tier, but the, you know, like a more proper Eden Prime kind of thing. I don't think we're going to see that this tier. I think we're going to see Eden again in the future, and they're just trying to throw us off like an Eden junction to the true villain, kind of, in a sense, like Griever junction to Ultimecia in Final Fantasy VIII. I think something like that is going to happen towards the very end. Now, as for those types of bosses, I mean, I don't see why not, but I mean, I'm not really interested in them, so it's not so much a matter of what I think will happen. I'm just not super interested in, you know, Orphan or Bartangelus or any of them. As for the, if I dare to ask one more question, what's your opinion on tank jobs being difficult to play compared to simple 1, 2, 3 and OGCD that lets you spam abilities like Fell Cleave and Bloodspiller, which doesn't require much understanding of the job? Should tank jobs be difficult on their own apart from knowing how and when to tank swap, since they are spared to some of the mechanics? I think tank difficulty for their DPS rotations is kind of right where it should be. Whether or not they could choose to identify them separately a little bit better. But, you know, I've leveled 2 of the tanks in the process of leveling Warrior, and I'm having fun with all of them. Gunbreaker I've definitely had the most fun with because it feels the most like a DPS rotation. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I was having a lot of fun with Paladin as well. So I don't know. That's actually a pretty tough call. I think I like the way they are now. I think that's just ultimately what my answer will be. But I'm also not a tank main, so what I think, I guess, doesn't really matter. Next question, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello to you, by the way. After completing the Shadowbringer story, I was bummed out to find the Amaro mount wasn't there, and it said locked behind me a Life of Adventure Part 4 achievement, which for those who don't know is to level every job to level 80, every combat job to level 80, other than Blue Mage, obviously. My question is, what do you think about changing the reward from a crown, since the new races cannot wear the crowns and its reward is more iconic to the story? From a crown? Oh, you mean from the story itself? I don't know. You're asking the guy who doesn't care about glamour if he cares about a crown, because I don't care about the crown. I also suspect that they're still working on more headpieces for Hrothgar and Vyre as time goes on, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that there. I actually was kind of nice. It was kind of nice to see the Amaro was locked so deeply behind, because I don't know, Midgardsormr. I just never cared about the main scenario mount, I guess, like, because it's like, whatever. And they're pretty cool mounts. Midgardsormr, the Magitech armor. The one for Stormblood? I don't remember now that we mention it. They're definitely. Oh, the yawl, the bird from the Alzim. It's called the yawl. I think those things are called. Whatever they are, the bird. That's the only one I can think of. Maybe there was another one. I don't remember, to be honest. But no, I'm okay with the way it is now. Alright, this one I saw had a ton of text, so I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and then I'm going to skip down to where the question was. Mrhappy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. I hope you're feeling a little better from last week. I am indeed. Although you're busy with videos and making content, just remember looking after yourself is important. Okay, maybe I'm at the second paragraph. First 2 paragraphs. Don't worry about taking your time if you need to do so. A lot of people here, myself, understand. We hope you feel better soon. Thank you. Now, as for my question, I did ask one a couple of weeks ago, but it didn't get picked. And I haven't gotten asking around another one till now. I do feel bad about adding another question to the pile of job-related ones. Hey, I said last week I didn't want to do them, but this week I've been doing them plenty, so you ain't got to worry about that. Looking to leave some feedback for Square Enix about Monk with some suggestions. It'd be great to hear your thoughts before I post on the Square Enix. Kanto, I left the TLDR. Okay, the TLDR is definitely the big thing that I got to, because, yeah, as you can see, guys can see, like, some good stuff here. I actually did read through it all already. But ultimately the question is, considering how Monk plays right now, what would you like to see change, and do you think the job is in a position where it might need a rework similar to Machinist and Summoner? Yes, I actually do. I think they've pigeonholed their design on Monk, and as much as I kind of like the base design, you know, the go back and forth between the back and the flank, and that identity I'd want to preserve. I feel like the way they've added things for Monk, because they just don't want to stray from that. They just keep piling things on top of that same design. They're just getting heavy. They're trying to hold all these new things up, and it's like, okay, but I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just carrying more things on top of it. And it doesn't even change ultimately like the main way that I play my job, and it hasn't changed in 6 years. I'm unlike a lot of people. I actually really like Riddle of Fire. I like that it makes it easier to double weave, especially if you're on higher ping, and I like how hard it makes you hit. I don't like a Knotman. I don't care for Six-Sided Star very much. It has its uses, but I'm just not a fan of the design of it. And I like chakras, so like there's bits and pieces that I like and I don't like. But yeah, they might have just pigeonholed their design with it to the point where They need to look at it from the ground up and decide how they really, really want that job to actually feel and function so they can get it correct instead of just throwing stuff on top of it like they eventually did with Machinists until they had to rework it. As for what they could do, you know, I want PB back down to 60 seconds. I know people are afraid of Tornado Kick coming back, and I wasn't a huge fan of the Tornado Kick rotation either. But I don't know, it just feels like like Samurai's complained about Shoha, about this situational skill that got a level 80. Monk's been getting just super situational skills every expansion for fucking 6 years. Sorry for the language, but it's like, that's why when I see Samurai's complain about Shoha, I'm like, listen, I totally feel for you, but you're not, honestly, I don't feel bad for you at the same time. Like, I totally feel for you, and I don't feel bad for you at the same time. Because as someone who wanted to play Monk for years, I was like, oh my god, here's another skill I can only use in certain scenarios. Here's another skill. It's like the whole identity of the job, in a sense, is here's a bunch of situational skills, and do you have stacks? Are you kicking that thing's ass? Good. Great. Wonderful. No yelling on the bus. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just, It's intense, man. It's intense. I hope that something happens with Monk. I mean, at least it's really strong and pretty easy to play right now, but I still don't like some of the newer stuff. Alright, this one also has a lot of text, but I saw the question, I was like, oh, I gotta take this, because I'm gonna put it all on the table for this question. I think I'll do one more after this as well. Hey, yo, what's up, Happy? Hope this last week was better than the previous. It was indeed. Random thought last Sailor Moon got me thinking, what if Eden is just a big extractor and storage for ether made by the 13th people as by Ascian influence to draw aspected ether from the first? Make it a plot device. So here's the big thing about Eden. Eden hasn't extracted any ether. What Eden actually did is it halted the flow of ether in particular. Now, to be fair, because of the void implications, halting the flow of ether is exactly something the 13th needs, because essentially the 13th is completely overrun with rampant free-flowing ether. So it's completely within reason. Basically, I'm agreeing with ultimately the 13th needs this thing. I don't know that they... I thought maybe they did develop it, or it initially came from the 13th, or it was removed from there somehow. I don't know how, maybe through a void portal of some sort, but whatever the reason is, Eden is something that isn't of this world, specifically meaning our shards, kind of like how Midgardsormr is from a faraway shard, and he was basically adopted by Hydaelyn to protect the source. But I don't know, for Eden it's really hard to tell. I'm really curious to know more about Eden, because there's a lot of speculation that I feel is very fair. But Eden, it's not like Omega, where it was kind of like when people would go with these off-the-wall theories about stuff that's happening, I was always like, it's just a tournament of power. Like, it's not really, it ended up being right. Yeah, he had like a deeper personal meaning for wanting it, but it still ultimately boiled down to super predictable and not very interesting. This is a lot of angles to take, and I'm way more excited for it. As for the actual question, by the way, looking at the Eden's Gate fights, many people, including myself, think the fights could be reorganized for Savage, be E2, 3, 4, 1 plus extra space. It should actually be something different from what we used to. What are your thoughts on this, and what order would you place the fights? I am adamantly, and every time I've said this, I've looked like an idiot. I'll be the first to say it. I'm 100% sure they're just going to be in the same order. Eden Prime being first is very, very deliberate. Like I mentioned earlier, it's entirely there because our expectations are always, as you've said here, that the Prime will be last. And yes, while Savage doesn't follow the story, like it's its own separate existence, it is still ultimately a representation of our adventure being dramatized. And our adventure still has a sequential order, even if it's being told by the Wandering Minstrel. Now, of course, the Minstrel or the Minstreling Wanderer has made up some crazy shit in the past. He's never completely changed something to the point where it was unrecognizable, but he's had us do the Phoenix and Bahamut phase and Golden Bahamut, and he's had, the super ultra, Ultima weapon that created this ball of ether death in the sky that would consume everything. So it's not that he hasn't outdone himself for a little bit, but, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't see any way in which 4 isn't the last one. They want Titan to be PTSD for everyone. They do not want Titan to be the second to last boss and be like, oh, he's the third fight, I guess that's good enough. No, it's Titan. They want him to ruin your life. That is his only purpose ever. So yeah, that's where I stand on that one. All right, a lot of the remaining questions were actually mostly ones that I kind of answered already previously. So this was the last one I could find that was, I guess I was capable of. I saw a few crafting ones in there. I'm terrible to ask about crafting. I was like, I've got 2.5 of them leveled right now, and I'm just buying leave kits so they can get to 80. I'll worry about it when Ishgard's closer. Okay, when the Restoration of the Holy See is a little closer, then I'll start learning a little bit more about crafting, but not right now. So hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy, a long-time watcher. First official question, a bonus of a relaxing hot tub night. I might be going to Vegas on a little vacation soon, just so you guys know. So if there's a Mondays with Mr. Happy that's a little late, or I have to do the questions on like the Thursday before, it's because I'm going to fucking Vegas. Let's go, a little vacation. Question is kind of a small one. Do you think they will ever add the Bahamut? But yeah, no, I would like again, I'm going on vacation. I could go to the Bahamas instead. To the normal raid roulette, I've been trying to clear it normal with synced with a friend of mine because it's the first time through. I can't seem to get a cute pop, even though she's a healer and I'm like, yeah, nobody does them on normal. Everyone does them unsynced. If you want synced, you really got to go out and find a group that really wants to go back and do those synced. No, there's no chance they ever add. Hi, Aloha. There's no chance that they ever add Bahamut to the normal raid roulette because it's not designed like a normal raid. The first tier is really easy and you could pug, at least 1, 2, and 4, and 5 actually not that bad to pug either. But from 6 and on, it's very easy for things to go terribly wrong. Even when you're synced and with a decent item level, they are very much real raids. As much as they're not labeled savage, they still are very much more severe punishment-wise than our normal raids are now, which is why they've been kept out of it this entire time. I don't know if they ever plan on revisiting that, but I know that for most people, it's fine to just do them unsynced. And I think that's how most people will end up doing those, unless you can find a group of people who really wants to do it the way that you're suggesting. But anyway, that is going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy, a longer one to make up for the last couple weeks, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to ask your questions in the comment section of the video below, and be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. You know the whole drill. But anyway, I'll do another patron credit scroll here, because I'm really proud that I have it working. Hey, by the way, I said at the beginning it didn't crash, but it came really close to crashing. When I tried to fill it with data, it really didn't like it. But I got it to work. Don't worry. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. But anyway, thank you for watching. I will see all of you in the next episode. And until then, take care.